Hey everyone, welcome to The Creek. My name is Jared Miller and I'm the ministry lead here. We've been doing a lot of pivoting in the last year. We've had to learn new technologies and adapt to new circumstances. 2020 has been the year of the pivot. When we first had the idea to move our ministry model online and use the best parts of technology to help people like you find yourself in God's story, we started to think about the promise of the Creek. Way back when we first had this idea that God could be using the people who live south of Fish Creek to minister to other people who live south of Fish Creek without having to build a multi-million-dollar facility, we thought we had an idea of what that promise might entail. It's funny, though, that God's promises so seldom live themselves out the way that we think they're going to. I mean, make no mistake, one of my core convictions as a human being, in one of the great truths that I've lived out over and over again in my own life and my own experience of faith, has been that God shows up for the things that God says he's going to show up for. But the reality of those promises is that they seldom seem to be kept in quite the way I think that they're going to be kept. In a lot of ways, God has really hitched his own wagon to this idea of promises. In the Hebrew Bible, the word for a divine promise is covenant. And it is related to the Hebrew word for cutting, because the first great covenant that God makes is with Abraham. As both a sign and a seal of this promise, God tells Abraham to offer a sacrifice, and then God stands in the middle of the two pieces, in between the two halves, and says, "Here is my promise to you." The implication being that by standing there, God is saying, "May it be to me as it is to this animal if I do not keep this promise with you." God is identifying himself as a God who keeps promises. It's one of the things that I love about looking at Nehemiah's story. Nehemiah has been made promises by God. He begins his whole story by praying and having this revelation that God wants him to go and do this great thing. And so he goes, and he's obedient, and he does what he's called to do. And difficulties arise, and Nehemiah perseveres through it. What do you do when the progress towards your promise is cut in half because your workers are suddenly working with hammer in one hand and sword in the other? What do you do when you're forced to adapt to a new and changing reality? You do exactly what Nehemiah did. You do exactly what all of us have done. You pivot. It's been said that change is the one great constant in the universe. We all live in a state of perpetual entropy. We all live in a state of perpetual decay. We are all changing at a molecular level every single day. We are made to pivot. It's easy to think that when a promise is made to us that we get to be the arbiters of that decision, that we get to hold on to it and say, here is the measure of what's been promised to me, and here's exactly what I expect this to do. But Nehemiah serves inadvertently as a great reminder that the promises God makes are ultimately about God. Because God fulfills promises in two ways. In one instance, he enforces our expectation. When God does something amazing, when God delivers people out of a tough medical situation, when God does something even more extreme, like hold the sun still in the sky for Joshua, or let the people of God walk across the Red Sea on dry land, or raise Lazarus from the dead. God is reminding us that the big things are nothing for God. That God plus nothing equals everything. And so if God can pull through in those big instances, how much more is God capable and able to pull through in small instances? How much less do we need to worry about the everyday, mundane, small things if God is capable of reminding us of the big things? If God is this promise-keeping God, then how much more secure should we think ourselves to be? The other way God interacts with our promises, though, is to supplant our expectations. From time to time, God does a strange work of asking us to trust him by challenging the way that we think that these are going to go. He reminds us that he is the one in control and not us. And the act of giving up that sense of control, that sense of power, that sense of authority, and that sense of kingship or rulership over our own lives is always going to move us more into line with who God is, with his character of grace and care and comfort. God was with those workers as they built the wall, with sword in one hand and hammer in the other. He knew that these were tools and that God was going to abandon his promise, even if he might supplant our expectations from time to time. We'll pick up there next week. For now, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. All the best, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.